Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Southern Nevada District Office's public meeting for Bonanza Solar Project. We're going to go ahead and get started. Did want to welcome everybody out. Thank you for the time and spending some time with us this evening to learn about this project. We can share some more information. I'm hopeful that technology will work and allow us to do this. Thanks for your patience as we go through some of this stuff. And if we have glitches, we'll work through them. But in the meantime, go ahead and go to the next slide. Real quick overview of the agenda for this evening. We'll have a quick presentation on the project. We'll have an opportunity for some question and answers. We will provide some more instructions on how we're going to accomplish that here. And then we'll also open up the time for some verbal comments. So again, we'll have some additional instructions for you when we get to that point. Go ahead and go to the next slide. Just want to do some real quick introductions for the team that's on tonight. I am Nicholas Pay. I'm the field manager for the Pahrump Field Office. I am the authorized officer for the Bonanza Solar Project for the Bureau of Land Management. Also, you will be hearing this evening from Katie Paiva. She is the BLM's project manager. You'll also be hearing from Coleman Burnett, who's the project manager for SWCA, and Meg Perry will be our facilitator for the evening. Super want to just publicly thank SWCA, SWCA, and the folks for all of the support in this program. Some of the other folks that you're going to see behind the scenes and we'll be getting questions from also include the BLM interdisciplinary team. So we have Tim Vandervoort, Kat Aben, Tiffany Arend, Laura Cobelt, Corey Lang, Matt Simons, and James Priest. And I appreciate all of those folks being on. They'll be kind of behind the scenes and providing some input during the mission or during the presentation as well. Next slide, please. So tonight's public meeting, you'll be given some opportunities to ask some questions and to provide some verbal comments. You'll be able to comment after the presentation, which is being recorded. Also, after the meeting, you'll see that link here on the screen, and we'll also share that link in the chat and make sure that you can get to that participate now button, because we realize you can't click on the screen to actually click the link. So we'll provide that in the chat. Also, there's an email address set up for the project. It's bonanzasolar@blm.gov. And then we still accept things the old-fashioned mail way. So please make sure that those are attention to the BLM Solar Project, so that they are the Bonanza Solar Project, so that they get to the right people at the state office. Next slide, please. This is just kind of our standard. Be careful when you're providing your information, your personal information. We will do our best to withhold that, but we can't guarantee that is actually going to happen. And then a reminder that anonymity is not allowed for submissions from organizations or businesses, and from the individuals identifying themselves as representatives of organizations or businesses. Next slide, please. So this is where we're at in the schedule. We're in the public review of a draft EIS, and because this is a resource management plan amendment, it is out for 90 days, which is slightly longer than we would normally have. So that public comment period will be open through December 5th of 2024, and still working towards that hope of having a decision in the summer or fall of 2025. Next slide, please. With that, I am going to stop talking and let Katie talk for a little bit about the project.
All right. Well, good evening. Again, I'm Katie Paiva, project manager for the Bonanza Solar Project. This project is going to be would be located in both Clark and Nye counties, Nevada. And the project include an approximate 5,100 application area on BLM administered lands. It would include a 300 megawatt solar photovoltaic system, a 300 megawatt battery energy storage system, and a 5.4 mile Gentile line connecting over to the existing Grid Alliance Innovation Substation. EDF Renewables did submit their SF299 application and their preliminary plan of development to the BLM in December of 2020. In August of 2021, the project was identified by the Department of Interior as a covered project under Title 41 of Fixing America's Surface Transportation Act, also known as FAST 41. Next slide. So the project would be located approximately 30 miles northwest of Las Vegas and approximately 5 miles west of Indian Springs. It would be located on the south side of Highway 95. And in the hatch mark, it shows the proposed solar application area. From there, the Gentile line would head west where it would connect to the Innovation Substation. So also located in the northeast corner of the application area there would be the location of a newly proposed NDOT mineral material site. Next slide. The project would consist of 3 buildable areas, totaling approximately 2,368 acres for the PV solar array blocks under the proposed action in alternatives 1 and 2. For alternative 3, there would be 5 buildable areas totaling 2,590 acres. For the proposed action in all alternatives, there would be a 5-acre on-site substation, a 30-acre, 300 megawatt battery energy storage system, and 2 40-foot wide access roads coming off of Highway 95. And it would have the 5.4 mile Gentile line connecting to the Innovation Substation. I'm not sure if anybody else has seen the slides, but I currently am not.
They're still shared, Katie. Coleman,
Okay.
you're seeing them?
No, they are not showing.
Ah, okay. Let me correct that. How about now?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, and this slide shows the 3 buildable areas. It's got the substation there in the blue, the battery energy storage system, and it shows the access roads and the Gentile line. Okay, you can go to the next slide. So for this project, there were 5 alternatives analyzed. The proposed action, which is described in the plan of development. Alternative 1, which reflects the Southern District Office Resource Integration Alternative. Alternative 2, which is the BLM preferred alternative. Alternative 3 being the modified layout alternative, and the no action alternative, which describes the impacts if the project were not to be built and the existing lands continued as they are. So, but some of the big differences between the proposed action and the action alternatives includes the different disturbance categories, grading limits, restoration requirements, and hydrologic controls. Next slide. So the draft EIS and RMP amendment categorizes the disturbance types based on construction methods and anticipated impacts to the resources, particularly soil, cactus, or cacti, yucci, and other vegetation. The 4 disturbance levels defined are D0, D1, D2, and D3. The disturbance intensity increases with each corresponding level, whereas D0 represents no disturbance and D3 represents the maximum disturbance. So DU0 is considered avoidance, where there's no impacts expected to the soils or the vegetation. D1 is overland travel, where soils left in place and vegetation would be partially crushed. D2 is clear cut, drive and crush, where no soils removed, but it is compacted. Vegetation remains above soil surface and is crushed. And then D3 is clear cut with soil removal. So this is where the soil is removed, restructured, and compacted. This disturbance is associated with traditional solar development in the solar panel arrays and with construction of other solar facilities, such as substation, inverters, and access roads. Next slide. So here are a few examples of what the disturbance categories look like. So in the top left picture, we have the D1 disturbance, which is associated with overland travel. An example of this would be accessing the panel arrays using a rubber tired or rubber tracked vehicle, such as a side-by-side or a tractor, or it could include minimal mowing. In the top right picture is an example of the D2 disturbance, which is associated with clear and cut and drive crush. This is where there is moderate to heavy disturbance. An example of this would be where like a front end loader may be used to clear vegetation, or it could be used where there's repeated vehicle traffic that completely crushes the vegetation. So with this type of disturbance, the soil is not removed or restructured, but it is very compacted and no vegetation remains on the soil surface. So, and then the bottom picture is an example of the D3 disturbance, which is associated with clear cut with soil removal. This is where there is heavy disturbance. Examples of this would be where there'd be disc and roll, grading, trenching. The soils are removed and they are extremely compacted, and the vegetation and seed banks are displaced. Next slide. So this chart shows the disturbance categories in relation to the proposed action and the three alternatives that have been developed. The alternatives were developed to reduce impacts to vegetation and minimize grading and ground disturbance, and using a combination of lower impact development methods for the construction would leave vegetation under solar panel arrays within buildable areas. So as you can see, the disturbance, as you can see, the D3 disturbance, which is the avoidance, is the same for the proposed action and the alternatives, except for alternative 3, which is slightly less. But as you go through the D1 through D3 disturbances, the disturbance acreages vary between the proposed action and the alternatives. So for comparison, looking at the proposed action in alternative 2, again, being the BLM preferred alternative, the D1 disturbance, being that overland travel, the proposed action has identified 944 acres of disturbance, whereas the BLM preferred alternative has identified 1,184 acres of disturbance. Looking at the D2 disturbance, which is clear cut, drive and crush, the proposed action has identified 442 acres of disturbance, and the BLM preferred alternative has identified 637 acres of disturbance. And then down to the D3 disturbance, which is the clear cut and with soil removal, the proposed action has identified 1,027 acres of disturbance, and the BLM preferred alternative has identified 592 acres of disturbance. Also addressed our vegetation objectives, which vary between the proposed action and the alternatives. The natural recovery period time under the proposed action would be 10 years, and under alternatives, the alternatives 1, 2, and 3, the natural recovery period time would be 2 years. And the same is similar with the active restoration time frame, whereas under the proposed action is 10 years, and under alternative 1 and 2 is 2 years. And under alternatives 2 and 3 would be 3 to 5 years. And this chart's available online for you to look at, and where you can take a closer look at it of the different disturbance categories and compare it to the alternatives. Next slide. So continue on, other differences with the alternatives are the perimeter road widths. Under the proposed action, they're 30 feet wide, whereas under alternatives 1 and 2, they have a 14-foot road width. For hydrological flow controls, they would not be allowed under alternatives 1 and 2. For Mojave Desert protection features, all would require an access management plan under alternatives 1 and 2. It would maintain natural flow patterns, and the maximum road widths would be that 14 feet. So for alternatives 1, 2, and 3, they would have the Mojave Desert tortoise reoccupation, and they would have the NDOT mineral material replacement site. I do want to note that all the alternatives have include an on-site water well with an off-site source at Indian Springs if that on-site well needed to be supplemented. Next slide. So the next few slides show the spatial differences between the proposed action and each of the 3 alternatives. So for the proposed action, it would have the 3 buildable areas. It would maintain a 50% vegetation cover with 65% vegetation density within the buildable areas. The D3 disturbance, the maximum disturbance would be 1,027 acres. Also, the proposed action does not include a mineral material replacement pit, which is to account for an authorized NDOT material site that overlaps the project area. Next slide. Alternatives 1 and 2 would have the same project components as the proposed action with a few differences. Alternative 1 would maintain a 75% vegetation cover within the buildable area. And the D3 disturbance would be limited to 20% of the total acreage for the buildable area, which would be 482 acres. Alternative 2 would maintain a 65% vegetation cover. And the D3 disturbance would be limited to 25% of the acreage of the buildable area for a total of 592 acres. Both alternative 1 and 2 would have up to 120 acre overlapping NDOT mineral material pit, which would be relocated to the northeast corner of the application area, which would be immediately adjacent to an existing mineral material pit. Next slide. So under alternative 3, the applicant would construct 5 buildable areas that would total 2,590 acres, allowing for wider spacing between panel rows. The D3 disturbance would be limited to 35% of the total buildable acreage for a total of 648 acres of that D3 disturbance. And the overlapping NDOT mineral material pit would be approximately 93 acres versus the 120 acres in alternatives 1 and 2. And it would also be relocated to the northeast corner of the application area. Next slide. So the draft EIS RMP amendment includes the analysis of the 2 RMP amendments to the Las Vegas Resource Management Plan. And one of those is for the adjusting of boundaries of existing utility corridors that go through the project area. The top picture shows the existing corridors and the bottom picture shows the proposed realignment of the corridors. Next slide. So the second RMP amendment would be for visual resource management classification. It would reclassify the application area from a class 3 classification to a class 4. Next slide. Coleman, I think this is, I will hand this off to you.
Thanks, Katie. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. Appreciate you being here and hearing our presentation tonight. I'm going to cover the next several slides where I'm going to do my best to recap the highest of the high points coming out of the draft DEIS analysis. The draft DEIS, if you've had an opportunity to look at it, is just under 300 pages long, not including appendices. So I won't be able to recap the details here, but as I mentioned, I'll do my best to point everyone in the direction of where you can find more information on these topics in the EIS. So as we've already discussed, the BLM's prepared a draft EIS / Resource Management Plan Amendment, or RMPA, to analyze the impacts to resources and resource uses that could occur in the application area, resulting from the proposed action, the action alternatives, and of course, the no action alternative. BLM gathered resource concerns and issues through the public scoping process, as well as collecting input from agencies, consulting parties through various coordination and consultation meetings. Project design features and mitigation measures are included in the analysis contained within the draft EIS. And again, I'm here to mainly recap the highest points for tonight and hopefully keep it as concise as possible. So here we go. Next slide. So starting with vegetation communities, this would be found in EIS section 3.2. So chapter 3, section 3.2. We, through field efforts conducted to inform the EIS analysis, 7 species of cacti were identified through field surveys, 1 species of yucca, and we found an estimated 63 cacti or yucca per acre within the application area. No special status plant species have been found within the application area. And as Katie walked us through the disturbance categories earlier as it relates to the alternatives, those same disturbance categories were used to analyze impacts to vegetation. So the main impacts to vegetation that were identified resulting from construction would be that clearing or cutting, grading, leveling the ground, soil removal, trenching, excavation would all disturb vegetation that's on site. Overland travel with machineries and vehicles can also crush plants. And then the ongoing operation and maintenance of the facility could require trimming of vegetation that would also be a long-term impact. So we've identified impacts corresponding with the disturbance levels that Katie walked us through. So those D1 disturbance level, that overland travel disturbance, is identified as temporary short-term impacts directly to vegetation, excuse me. Drive and crush disturbance, or that D2 level of disturbance, would be a temporary spanning to long-term direct impact to plants. And then that D3 level of disturbance, the clear cut with soil removal, also known as grading, would be permanent impacts or disturbance to vegetation. So here we're presenting the table that is just like what Katie presented earlier. The disturbance categories, D0 to D3, across the various action alternatives in the proposed action. So you can start to see how the alternatives and how they're developed can have a ripple effect into how the impact analysis is presented for the EIS. Next slide. Next, we'll touch on water resources, focusing on groundwater. We also analyzed impacts to surface water, and these water resource impacts can be found in EIS Chapter 3, Section 3.6. So as Katie mentioned, the applicant proposes to drill an on-site water well to serve as the primary water source during construction and operation of the project. However, depending on the production of that well, it may be necessary for water to be trucked in from a supplemental source that's off-site. This could be from a nearby well, such as the Indian Springs Water Company, or perhaps water may need to be imported from outside the Indian Springs Valley Groundwater Basin, Basin 161. The table on the slide here quantifies the different water usage amounts, the totals for the different project phases. So we have construction estimated water use at 250 to 325 acre feet total. Operation and maintenance, we're looking at 1 acre foot a year over the 40-year life of the project. Decommissioning could use up to 250 acre feet total. So we're looking at a total water use over the life of the project ranging from 540 to 615 acre feet. A few other points to mention around groundwater use is that as part of our analysis, we modeled groundwater decline or drawdown during various phases of the project. For construction, it's estimated that drawdown of less than 5 feet could occur at the on-site water well. That modeled drawdown would be reduced to 1 foot of drawdown at about 7,800 feet from the offsite well. Annual groundwater level decline or drawdown during operation and maintenance is estimated to be less than 1/10 of a foot at the on-site well location. Keeping in mind these estimates do not include groundwater recharge, so they reflect the worst case scenario for model drawdown based on the project and the water use estimates. We also looked at how groundwater pumping may affect the Devil's Hole area, which is home to the endemic endangered Devil's Hole pupfish. And modeling through the Death Valley groundwater flow model, DV3, found that groundwater pumping at the on-site well could result in 0.007 feet, so 7/1000ths of a foot or less of water drawdown at Devil's Hole. Let's move on to the next slide, please. Another resource area that we analyzed in the EIS include wildlife. Tonight, I'll focus my talking points on threatened and endangered species, but we analyzed impacts to a range of wildlife species from general wildlife to BLM special status. But again, here we're focusing on those federally listed species under the Endangered Species Act. For more information, you can look at EIS Chapter 3, Sections 3.3 and 3.4 is where you would find wildlife-related analysis. So we have 3 birds protected under the Endangered Species Act that may be impacted by the project. Yuma Ridgway's rail, southwestern willow flycatcher, and yellow-billed cuckoo. They could migrate through the area, but there is no suitable habitat present within the application area. We also have 12 groundwater dependent species at Devil's Hole, which I referenced earlier, which is also near the Ash Meadows National Wildlife Refuge, that could be impacted due to water use from the on-site well or off-site water source. And then the third category of federally protected species I'd like to bring up tonight would be impacts to the Mojave Desert tortoise. This project area, the application area, is located within important Mojave Desert tortoise connectivity habitat. Field surveys conducted for the proposed project found 53 Mojave Desert tortoise during these field surveys, which resulted in an estimated 3.5 tortoise per square kilometer within the buildable areas. And remember, those buildable areas, Katie pointed out earlier, range from 3 to 5, all situated within that 5,133 acre application area. Again, going back to the importance of this area, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service describes the area between Indian Springs and the Amargosa Valley as essential to maintain Mojave Desert tortoise connectivity between the eastern and northeastern recovery units. Other items to note here is that alternatives 1, 2, and 3 are designed in a way to result in conditions that would be appropriate for passive reintroduction of Mojave Desert tortoise. And what I mean by that is the vegetation cover goals and standards, as well as the recovery periods for vegetation, are designed to lead the project towards having suitable or appropriate conditions for allowing future reoccupation of the site by tortoise. Of course, the vegetation cover would need to meet standards approved by BLM and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service prior to allowing tortoise to be passively reintroduced to the site. Next slide, please. Another topic in the EIS includes analyzing impacts to cultural resources. For more information, you can look in EIS section 3.7 for our detailed analysis. But some of the key takeaways here is that 10 cultural resources were identified and assessed as part of the Class 3 survey effort for cultural resources. Of these 10 resources, 9 have been determined or recommended ineligible for listing on the National Register of Historic Places, or NRHP. That leaves one resource remaining. A tribally identified trail is still under evaluation. It's been determined ineligible under criterion D for listing on NRHP, but remains unevaluated under criteria A through C. And this feature is pending additional tribal consultation efforts that are underway by the BLM currently. So the Class 3 survey area or analysis area includes that area where physical or temporary vibratory effects could occur. And that was that area that was surveyed includes the application area plus the NDOT mineral material replacement site with a 100-foot buffer. So that's where these 10 sites in question are located. But in addition to that, BLM also looked at the Class 1 cultural resources analysis area, which takes the application area and adds a 15-mile buffer to that application area boundary, with the intention of identifying any visual, auditory, or atmospheric effects that could occur to cultural resources or historic properties within that 15-mile buffer. There we found 2 eligible historic properties within the area. Upon further investigation, we found there's no visible line of sight to the solar project from these historic properties. Therefore, no effects to the properties have been identified. Next slide, please. Native American concerns are also analyzed in draft EIS section 3.7. I just referenced that tribally identified trail. It crosses the northern portion of the Bonanza solar application area and remains unevaluated, currently under criteria A through C, and tribal consultation for that identified trail is underway currently. When we look at how the alternatives relate to this tribally identified trail, alternative 3 would avoid the trail completely. In addition to the trail feature, we also have other concerns that have been shared by tribes with BLM during ongoing consultation efforts. Those concerns include impacts to native vegetation, impacts to Mojave Desert tortoise and the species habitat, impacts to water resources, as well as impacts to visual resources. And as noted here, BLM continues to participate in government-to-government consultation with tribes, as well as NHPA or National Historic Preservation Act, Section 106 consultation with other consulting parties. Next slide, please. All right, these next 2 slides will focus on visual resources. Hang in there, folks. I just have a few more slides to go as I recap the high points of the EIS. For visual resources, we analyze the existing landscape character, scenic quality, and considered key observation points that could be affected by the project. So when we talk about visual resource impacts, we think about removal of vegetation, fugitive dust, movement and presence of heavy vehicles or equipment during construction, as well as those long-term impacts on the landscape resulting from infrastructure being placed in an area that's currently undeveloped. So this new infrastructure could introduce lines, colors, textures, geometric patterns on the landscape that are not currently in the viewshed. So those could be long-term impacts, right? Like including geometric shapes of the solar panels and project facilities, which could weaken or result in weak to moderate contrasts in form, line, color, and texture. What we found for this project is the visual resource impacts were relatively weak or moderate as stated here. And if we move to the next slide, we can see one of the key observation points or KOPs with a visual simulation showing how the proposed solar facility might look on the landscape. So here we're standing on eastbound US 95 adjacent to the project area or application area. We're looking to the southeast, and you might be able to see in the middle ground there some dark shading that might look like cloud cover. It's a bit long, linear. That's the visual simulation of the solar facility. It's important to note that the more vegetation that's left on site can actually help mitigate those geometric patterns I mentioned earlier that could result from a proposed development like this. The vegetation can actually help soften the edges of the solar panels from a visual perspective and help the project blend into the landscape a bit better. Be sure to reference, I don't think I gave you the section number, section 3.10, chapter 3, 3.10 of the EIS for detailed analysis of the visual resource impacts. Next slide, please. We also analyzed impacts to socioeconomics and environmental justice communities. Here we're looking at employment of an average of 280 workers, peaking at 500 workers during construction. For operation and maintenance of the proposed project, there's an estimated 12 permanent staff needed for operation. In our analysis, we found no adverse impacts to property values from this proposed project. And some economic benefits we found is enhancing the electrical grid flexibility by adding a low carbon intensity electric generation capacity. And this project also involves that battery energy storage system. So we're enabling storage of electricity through the proposed project. Impacts related to air quality, noise, traffic, and viewshed alteration were considered, as I've touched on in my previous slides. None of these impacts are expected to adversely or disproportionately affect environmental justice communities. More information about socioeconomics and environmental justice impacts can be found in EIS section 3.11. Next slide, please. And it wouldn't be a true presentation of EIS impact analysis if I didn't briefly touch on cumulative impact analysis. For this draft EIS RMPA, we identified 119 reasonably foreseeable future actions, which we refer to as RFFAs. These are other projects out in the landscape aside from the proposed Bonanza Solar project that could have similar impacts to resources as the Bonanza Solar project, or maybe even the impacts might not be similar, but they're proposed to impact the same resources as the proposed action. So as we analyzed direct and indirect impacts to resources, we also took into account those cumulative impacts from these reasonable foreseeable future actions. Here's a bulleted list, I won't read them out to you, of all the different resources and uses that we analyzed for cumulative impacts. A few notable cumulative impacts include long-term loss of habitat, habitat fragmentation, and movement barriers to wildlife from the proposed solar project and from these RFFAs. We're also seeing an estimated long-term degradation of Mojave Desert tortoise connectivity habitat, groundwater drawdown at existing local wells, and potential stress to the Indian Springs groundwater basin due to many of these reasonably foreseeable future actions also have estimated water use requirements as part of their projects as well. And then some of these projects are also in proximity to Devil's Hole, which I mentioned earlier, and therefore lowered water levels at Devil's Hole could occur from the RFFAs in addition to the impacts I mentioned earlier from proposed Bonanza Solar. All right, next slide, please. I should mention cumulative impacts are analyzed in EIS section 3.14. For more information, you can look there. And then finally, I will wrap up with the Cactus Springs ACEC nomination. So ACEC stands for Area of Critical Environmental Concern. And during public scoping, the BLM received a nomination package for the Cactus Springs ACEC. The originally nominated area is shown here in the figure with the purple dashed line, which covers 58,000 acres. As part of the nomination process, BLM had to review the nomination package and then prepared a relevance and importance evaluation report for the nominated area. And actually through BLM's review, they found that the area with relevant and importance, meeting the relevance importance criteria, was actually larger than the 58,000 acre area. And so the nominated area now covers 82,573 acres, which is shown in the green shaded area at the bottom of the screen. You can see how these various areas relate to the application area for Bonanza Solar as indicated with the black hash lines. So the evaluation of the nominated ACEC and the associated report written by BLM is contained in Appendix K of the draft EIS RMPA. In Appendix K, you will see a list of temporary management and implementation actions that would apply to the Bonanza Solar project if approved. It's worth noting that the evaluation of the nominated ACEC is outside the scope of the proposed Bonanza Solar project. Therefore, you wouldn't see the ACEC represented in any of the action alternatives analyzed in the DEIS. But again, I point to those temporary management and implementation actions that would apply to the proposed project if approved. Okay, I think that concludes the presentation of the EIS impact analysis. Let's move to the next slide. And I can hand the mic back to Nick. Thank you.
Thanks for holding with us, folks. I know that this one's been kind of painful, just trying to get through a lot of analysis really quick. So consultations and coordinations that are currently underway, we are continuing to our government-to-government responsibilities to Native American tribes. We're also continuing the National Historic Preservation Act, Section 106, consultation with the Nevada State Historic Preservation Office and other consulting parties. The BLM is using NEPA substitution as defined under the regulations, which allow us as a federal agency to use the NEPA process and EIS to comply with the NHPA requirements. So you'll see a few differences in that and the EIS from the way you would typically see that information. BLM has also initiated Section 7 consultation with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and then also consulting with under the Clean Water Act with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Next slide, please. We did invite several different agencies to be consulting parties and cooperating agencies. You'll see those listed on the screen. Big ones that we want to highlight here is the Nevada Department of Transportation. Has been kind of a critical player in that, as well as the United States Department of Defense and Department of Energy, which isn't listed on there as a cooperating agency, but they are participating. Next slide, please. So this is kind of the big piece that everybody wants to know about. The public comment period, like we mentioned earlier, is open through December 5th, and we'll be responding to those through the winter and into the spring as we draft the final EIS and RMPA, with that coming out and expected to be in spring in 2025. And then the record of decision we anticipate being in the late summer or early fall of 2025. Next slide, please. I'll pass this back to Meg.
All right, thanks to all of our presenters for sharing that overview. And we've already had some questions starting to come in. Both some folks submitted questions when they registered, and then we've got a few questions already submitted in the Q&A tool here in Zoom. So if you do have a clarifying question on the presentation you just heard, go ahead and click that Q&A button here in Zoom, and you should see a little box pop up where you can type in your question and click send. So we will work through those with the time we have this evening, and we will hold some time at the end for those formal public comments, which you'll have the opportunity to submit verbally. So we'll take as many questions as we can while reserving time at the end for comments. So with that, we're going to start with the questions that were submitted in advance. So I'll work through those, and Nick will share some responses, and then we'll turn to the questions that have been submitted live here in the meeting today. So as we're going through those, if you do think of another question, just click on that Q&A tool to submit your question. I don't think we have anyone joining us by phone today, but if you did, you can press *9 to raise your hand. All right, so let's start with some of those pre-submitted questions. So first, Nick, there was a question about the status of the proposed Cactus Springs ACEC. I know we spoke to that a little bit in the presentation, but just wanted to make sure got a direct answer to that.
Absolutely. So our interdisciplinary team has completed the review of that Cactus Springs ACEC nomination, and that is, as Coleman mentioned, as Appendix K of the draft EIS. And we did find that the area as it was proposed and in the amended boundary does have relevant important values. So the next steps in that is we did identify proposed temporary management and implementation actions for the Bonanza Solar Project. These measures have been designed to prevent and protect irreparable damage to the relevant important values. And any temporary management that is implemented through these decisions would be in effect until the BLM either completes an RMP or a relevant RMP amendment or finds temporary management of the area to be no longer necessary. Again, additional information is available in Appendix K, and that's where we are with that.
Great, thanks, Nick. All right, next question submitted in advance was a request to identify and name all wild horse and burro herd areas and herd management areas impacted, including exact acreage, lost resources, and mitigation.
Yeah, there's a really good description of this in the EIS, but the summary of it is that there are 2 herd management areas that are impacted. They're the Johnny and Wheeler Pass HMAs that intersect with the project area. The project represents about 3% of the Johnny HMA. The Johnny HMA has no appropriate management level for horses. The short answer for that is that horses shouldn't be there. And for burros, there would be no change in the available HMA for forage. The project area represents approximately 2% of the Wheeler Pass HMA. And the Wheeler Pass HMA, the loss of about 2,500 acres could result in the loss of foraging habitat for about, or less than 1% of the HMA for horses and burros. The applicant will implement the following mitigation measures to plan and implement if this project was approved, including vegetation management plan, lighting plan, site restoration revegetation plan, integrated weed management, traffic control, and worker education. And further information regarding these herd management areas is in Table C of the draft EIS and Appendix C. Issues analyzed in brief and issues dismissed from detailed analysis. One other thing that I will note here is that while these are portions of those herd management areas, we don't often see a lot of use from wild horses or burros down in this area next to the highway. They tend to stay up closer into the Spring Mountains. So it's not a heavily used area for wild horse and burros.
All right, thanks, Nick. 2 more pre-submitted questions. Oh no, sorry, 3. The next one, why not use the almost 3 million acres of previously disturbed land that the BLM's new solar plan identified instead?
Yeah, so the final utility scale solar programmatic EIS was released on August 29th of this year. And prior to this date, solar energy applications were applied for under the 2012 solar PEIS and its record of decision. As BLM has numerous solar energy applications at various stages in the process of review, to maintain the orderly administration and management of public lands, the 2024 solar PEIS identified criteria to determine which solar energy development applications would be subject to it and to the extent to which its elements would be applied. The Bonanza Solar Project meets the criteria identified in the 2024 solar PEIS to be partially exempt, and the BLM initiated a NEPA publishing a notice of intent before August 30th. The programmatic design features would adopted in the 2024 plan. If that is what ends up being signed, will apply to partially exempt applications such as the Bonanza Solar Project. But until that there is a record of decision signed for that, we can't really manage according to a proposed plan.
Okay, thanks. Next question, why does BLM allow leasing of Nevada lands for foreign-owned solar projects, and where is the generated power destined to be used?
So to be eligible for a right-of-way on BLM lands, it's under Title V of the Federal Land Policy and Management Act, and its implementing regulations found at 43 CFR Part 2800. Qualifications for those who may hold a grant include an individual, association, corporation, partnership, or similar business entity with a federal agency or state, tribal, or local government, technically and financially able to construct, operate, and maintain and terminate the use of the public lands they're applying for, of legal age to and authorized to do business in the state or states where the right-of-way you seek is located. The power generated by the Bonanza Solar Project would be delivered to the Grid Alliance Innovation Substation, which is approximately 5.4 miles west of the Bonanza Solar Project, and connected to the electrical grid. The applicant has an executed power purchase agreement with the Southern California Public Power Authority on February 27, 2024. And the applicant also executed a large generator interconnect agreement with California Independent System Operator.
Great, thanks, Nick. And I know there's a lot of detailed questions and responses tonight. I believe I'm correct that the recording will be posted after this meeting. Is that right? So if folks aren't
Correct.
catching every single detail, you'll definitely have a chance to see that recording once it's posted, and certainly before the end of the comment period in December. Great. All right. Next question. Why have EIS alternatives not included panel stand design options to avoid complete site grading of previously undisturbed land?
It's a good question. And the 3 action alternatives, in addition to the proposed action, were identified for detailed analysis in this EIS. The action alternatives are specifically designed to minimize grading and ground disturbance, as well as reduce the impacts to vegetation cover.
Great. All right. That does it for our pre-submitted questions. And then I think we have a good number of questions that folks have submitted in the Q&A. So thanks to everyone who's dropping some questions in there. We've got about an hour left in our scheduled meeting time, and we'd like to hold some time at the end for comments. Make sure you all get a chance to share any comments if you would like. So we're going to take as many of those questions as we can in the next 30 minutes, and then reserve the final 30 minutes for comments.
And Meg, while you're looking at that too, the other thing I will note too is that all of the questions that we receive, we'll put together as a frequently asked questions section as well, and we'll provide those on the e-planning webpage once we get those put together.
Great. Yes, hopefully some of these answers will be helpful to folks who might be putting together written comments. All right, so just checking where we have some responses ready, and thanks to our team in the background pulling those together. All right. Nick, I think we're going to go to question number 2 first. So that question was, do you have permission to dig the well yet from the state engineer?
Thanks for that. The applicant is working with the Indian Springs Water Company, and the Indian Springs Water Company has applied for that point of diversion request, but that is as far as it has gone. It is still a pending application.
All right. And then I believe we have a response ready on question number 4. Someone asked, can you show 1 KOP from Cold Creek?
Yeah, to find that, we're not really set up to show that on this presentation. but you'll want to refer to section 5.1.5 in the visual report that is on the e-planning webpage. And KLP 5 is associated with the community of Cold Creek from the Cold Creek Road.
Great. I'm gonna type that into the Q&A as a written response, just in case anyone missed that number. It was section 5.1.5 in the visual report, KOP number 5. Right. And while we're waiting on a few other responses, I'll just flag that if you click on the chat here in Zoom, I dropped a couple of pieces of information there for your reference. One is the options for how to submit written comments. And the other is just a link to the e-planning site, which includes the full draft EIS, as well as the current frequently asked questions document under the documents tab. So hopefully some of those are helpful to you all in finding resources you may be looking for. Okay. Looks like we're ready with a response on question number 1. And that was a question asking, all of the proposed action alternatives have substantially 500 acres less of D3 clear cutting. Why would BLM select the proposed alternative given it imposes maximum vegetation damage to double the land area?
I am looking for an answer really quick. I apologize. My computer is being difficult on this one.
Nick, I can take that if
Thank you,
like.
Coleman. Or Katie.
Yeah. The BLM preferred alternative is alternative 2. And alternative 2 proposes less grading D3 disturbance than the proposed action and alternative 3, but more grading than alternative 1. So the grading totals include roads, the battery energy storage system, the substation inverters, which require flat ground.
Thanks, Katie. All right, looks like we have a response on number 3. Nick, are you seeing that?
I forgot I put myself on mute. Yes, we're good.
Okay, great. So the question there was, how would a water drawdown at Cactus Springs be mitigated or be mitigation?
Yeah, so the closest spring to the on-site well is an unnamed spring, with the Cactus Springs being slightly further away. Drawdown at the unnamed spring is estimated to be at 0.51 feet. This is a conservative estimate that doesn't account for groundwater recharge during and recovery during operations and maintenance. Additionally, the Western Solar Plan design featured WR3-1 would implement monitoring using adaptive management strategies to ensure long-term water use does not contribute to the long-term decline of groundwater levels through the operations and maintenance of the project.
All right, thank you. Okay, I think we're ready on number 6. Seeing that one, Nick?
I am not seeing that one. Katie, are you happening to see that one? I don't know why my computer is deciding to only give me half the answers.
Yeah, I can take that one. The BLM's determined to defer any further.
Oh, sorry, Katie, let me give the question.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Yep, that might be helpful.
So the person asked, said, thank you for discussing our Cactus Springs ACEC nomination. Would this be reviewed in a future resource management plan revision? And when is this revision foreseeable? Is there a date?
Yeah, okay. So the BLM's determined to defer any further evaluation of the presence of relevant and important values and the need for special management attention associated with this ACEC nomination to future resource management plan revision process under 43 CFR 1610.7. Okay, anyhow, currently the Nevada statewide resource management plan modernization is unfunded and the time frame for public scoping is unknown.
More to come on that. All right, we're getting lots of great questions. So thanks for bearing with us as we work through these live, everyone.
I just wanted to chime in too and let folks know what's going on. So as you guys are answering questions, the team that's in the background is actually writing me an answer and finding me the right information. So that's what we're waiting for. And that's why, for whatever reason, some of them are showing up for me and some are not. So big thanks to the team making me look good. Being able to find us all of these good answers. So I appreciate the patience.
All right. Looks like we have a response ready on question number 9.
I do have that one.
Okay, great. So that question asked, did you say that under the current guidelines in the 2024 solar PEIS, the Bonanza project would be fully exempt because it had initiated publishing the draft EIS prior to August 30th, or would it be partially exempt because the Federal Register notice was actually published after August 30th?
So under the current proposed plan for the solar PEIS, the Bonanza solar project would be partially exempt, not fully exempt. Partially exempt means that the project would be exempt from the exclusion areas land use allocation. This project would comply with the programmatic design features found in Appendix B of the final programmatic EIS and proposed RMPA once a record of decision has been issued. Any design features that are not currently in the draft EIS RMPA Appendix B will be reviewed and incorporated into the final programmatic EIS and proposed RMP for the Bonanza Solar project where appropriate, assuming that this record of decision for the utility scale solar energy development has been issued first.
Great, thanks for that clarification. All right. All right, looks like we've got a response on the question about tortoises, number 7. So this question asked whether is the plan to remove the tortoises and then release them back to the project site under the panels?
So all tortoises found within the buildable areas of the Bonanza Solar project will be translocated according to a BLM and Fish Wildlife Service approved Mojave Desert Tortoise Translocation Plan, which is currently under development. All tortoises are projected to be translocated a safe distance south of the project area. And then once vegetation conditions or the percentage cover within the project's buildable areas has recovered to a safe condition for tortoises, the exterior tortoise fences could be lifted or removed, allowing the tortoises to passively reoccupy or move through the facility.
Great, thank you.
I'm just going to chime in with a couple of notes on this. We are getting a few comments about other solar projects in the area. Please remember that tonight we are here to talk about the Bonanza Solar Project. And let's keep our projects focused on that. If you have additional questions about some of those other projects, feel free to reach out and talk to us. But tonight we're focused on the Bonanza Solar Project.
Okay, thanks, Nick. Good to clarify. All right. Okay, I want to make sure, let's see. Just checking what we've responded to and what's still outstanding. All right, I do see a hand up. And just as a reminder, if you can type any questions into the Q&A tool here in Zoom, that would be great. And then when we get to the comment period, we'll take raised hands for verbal comments.
And thank you guys for your comments. There are some actually really good questions that are coming in. So it's taken our staff a little bit of time to find some answers for us.
Okay, I think we've got one question we're going to respond to, and then two that may require a little bit more digging to make sure we get the accurate information. So as Nick mentioned, there will be a document with the questions and answers provided on today's meeting, created and shared following this meeting. So there's a couple of these that are really good questions, and we want to make sure that you have the correct technical information in response to those. So we're going to defer responding to those live to make sure we have time to gather that information, and they'll be included in that document when it's released. So if you don't hear an answer tonight, you can look for it in that document. Okay, looks like consensus on the team is that we're gonna hold the rest of the time for comments. And respond in writing via that forthcoming document on the outstanding questions. So thank you again, everyone, for all these thoughtful questions. We know it's a lot of technical information and a large document to review. So wanted to make sure you all had an opportunity to get some clarification where it might help you to prepare more informed comments. And with that, we'll turn to some open time for formal public comment for the record. As Nick mentioned, you have the opportunity to submit written comments, of course, until December 5th. But we will take some time now for comments during the meeting today.
As we dive into this, I just wanted to remind people that please be respectful. One of the things that I think often gets overlooked is that as federal land managers, we are required to respond to applications that were received for the use of public lands. And that is what we are doing. We're in the process of considering that. And we go through this process, and it is part of our decision-making process. There has not been a decision made on this project. One of the valid alternatives that still exist is the no action alternative. So we really do value your comments. And the more information that you can provide for us, the better off it all is for everybody. On the screen, you'll see some really good tips for effective comments. A lot of what we're looking for is if there is information that we have missed that is not included in there. If there's information that you have, please let us know where to find that. If there are questions about adequacy or the methodologies that we use or assumptions that you feel are incorrect, provide us the basis for that and figure out how to move forward, or present some additional information that is relevant. There are some really good comments that are coming in, and I'm looking forward to being able to answer those. I apologize that some of those were a little bit more, require a little bit more work to get a proper answer to, and so we want to make sure that we answer those correctly and we don't give any misinformation. So one other note I will make here is that we won't be responding to your public comments. We want to be able to hear from as many of you as possible, and so we will be listening. I'll be on screen, I'll be listening. Please remember that you're speaking to me as the decision maker, and provide as much information as you can.
Great. Thanks, Nick. Yeah, and just to be clear, the clarifying questions we've been sharing responses to, those are not a formal part of the project record. These comments we're now shifting into will be formally documented as part of the public comment process in the same way that written comment that you submit would be. So that's the difference there. All right. So just a few guidelines here. We're going to give each person who would like to share a comment today 3 minutes to speak. Obviously, if you have more than 3 minutes of comments to share, which you might, we welcome you to submit that in writing before December 5th. As Nick mentioned, we won't be responding to comments, but I will thank you for your comment when you finish. And to let us know that you have a comment to share, you can click the raise hand icon in Zoom to let us know. I don't think we have anyone phone only today, so we don't have to worry about that. And we will ask you to please state and spell your name for the record when you begin your comment. If it looks like you're getting right up close to the 3 minutes, I'll chime in a few, like 30 seconds before, just to make sure you're tracking the time. All right. So with that, I think we'll turn to our first commenter. I'm going to allow you to unmute.
Hello, Laura Cunningham, LauraCunningham. I'm with Basin and Range Watch and Western Watersheds Project. And can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, my comment, thank you. My comment is that, yeah, thank you for considering our Cactus Springs Area of Critical Environmental Concern nomination. I think it your map looked really good to make it even larger, but we'll be submitting detailed written comments that I think it should have been analyzed as a conservation alternative during this resource management plan amendment process and EIS. And so it seems like the new public lands rule, which has been approved, says that we really need to balance development with conservation and preservation of intact landscapes and this crucial Mojave Desert Tortoise connectivity corridor. And my second comment really quick is that the rare cactus that we found that appears to be like a sprawling, spineless, low pencil cholla seems to be like a pencil cholla with strange flowers, lemon yellow flowers that's on the project site. I've talked to 2 botanists who thought this was a strange possible new taxon, like a variety or a subspecies or possibly a new species of cactus. And I know BLM contracted a 3rd botanist to take a quick look at it in the field. But as far as I know, there's been no genetic analysis, no DNA analysis, no formal publication of this cactus and its strange characters or, you know, possibly differing genetics. So I will put that in our detailed analysis that I really think that we should do the no action alternative and delay any proposal to build solar on this high value public lands. Thank you very much.
Thanks for your comment. All right. Next. You should be enabled to unmute now.
This is Kevin Emmerich, EMMERICH. I'm also with the organization Basin and Range Watch. First off, I am worried about the water, the well-being within perhaps a mile and a half of Cactus Springs. I know that area has already seen a large water drawdown, and if it does any more, it's a real worry that we would see some of those cottonwood, mesquite start to die off, more mistletoe on the mesquite. I think that needs to be more properly analyzed. That could be a real impact from this project. Secondly, if I heard correctly, I mean, you essentially said that further consideration of this ACEC, the Cactus Springs ACEC, could take more funding. And the comment before said you could consider it in a plan amendment, but it would seem to me that because this area has been identified as the most crucial desert tortoise connectivity area in Nevada, that conservation alternative is a very good alternative. And that's why I brought up the other 3 projects in the question and answer, because if they are grandfathered into the solar plan, this area is supposed to all be excluded. It looks like that's a convenient way to let those in without considering the ACEC. So because that's such a reasonable alternative, I would request that you pause the Bonanza solar review so you can review the ACEC alternative as a separate NEPA review. We're requesting you do a plan amendment and you review the ACEC as a EA or an EIS. I think that's the fair thing to do because this is a solar project. It's not going to leave all the vegetation. In fact, it looks like it's going to grade or drive and crush in some of the alternatives half of that habitat. So that's a major impact to the desert tortoise in this most crucial connectivity area. And because of that, we are requesting that you slow down. This area is really important. It's not just the biological resources, but the people in the town of Indian Springs have a real problem with that much land being cut off from access. So that's a fast 41 project, but we're going too fast. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Appreciate your comment. All right, other comments? We've thrown a lot of information at you and including a lot of answers to questions. So I'm just going to leave a little time for folks to think if they might have something what they wanted to comment on.
Yeah, as you guys are considering that too, is just let us know. And we're looking forward to being able to have these conversations and provide some additional information, and look forward to hearing from you. So thanks for those comments that have happened already.
And if you do have a comment to share, just click that raise hand button in Zoom and we'll call on you. All right, I'm not seeing any other hands up, so maybe we'll just go ahead and run through a reminder of how to submit written comments and let those who don't have a comment get on with the rest of their evening. But the team will be here through the end of the scheduled meeting time. So if you think you might have a comment, we'll be sticking around and available to record it.
Yeah, so like we had mentioned earlier, this is open for a 90-day public comment period that closes on December 5th. And so between now and then, you have multiple ways to get us your information. There is more information available at the project website, which we did include in the chat. And there is a participate now button on the e-planning webpage that will allow you to submit comments through that way. You can also email your comments to that bonanzasolar@blm.gov email address. You may also submit your written comments to the Nevada State Office, attention Bonanza Solar Project, at the address listed there on the screen. I will also note that also during this public comment period, we will also be doing in-person public comment periods or public meetings. And someone's going to have to remind me what the days are for that, because I forgot.
We'll get that from the team.
Yeah, so we'll have those opportunities as well. So look forward to hearing from folks. And like has been mentioned, we'll be on until the scheduled time of the meeting. So if anybody does have comments, feel free to raise your hand and we'll get you called on.
Hey, those the in-person meetings are November 6th and November 7th.
And is the details of that on the e-planning site as well?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so if you're interested in in-person meetings, check that project website for more details about where and when those are taking place.
Thank you, Katie.
Great. All right, well, thanks again, everyone, for your interest in this project and in these resources and this area, for your time this evening and your attention. And the team will be standing by to take any additional formal public comments with the remaining time that we have. And we'll be following up with the recording of this meeting, as well as written documentation of the questions and answers from this meeting.